Before we get started on the conversation, I know from having done a film myself that so many people work on these films to make them possible. And so before I ask either of you any questions, I wanted to give you both a moment just to recognize the people that made these films possible in addition to yourselves. So Marshall, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Laura and Charlotte were the first two people I called when I found the footage and had cut some things together and said, I want to figure out how to finish this thing and make something from it, and they came in. So that was huge. Rich Remsburg is the archivist who was able to track down all the footage, and then there was a group of other folks that were helping in lots of different ways.
And here tonight is the producer of this film, Mr. Carl Deal, and Carl right there. The executive producers, Tia Lesson and Basil Hamden, right back there. And the co-producer of the film, Veronica Moore, my sister, right back there. Is that, I don't know who else is that it? That's pretty much, I think, who came here tonight, yeah. So thank you. I couldn't do any of this without them, and I've been working with them for many, many years.
I should disclose too that at the beginning of my work in journalism, I worked as a junior producer for Michael Moore and with Tia Lesson. She's one of the most tenacious people in any medium that we have in our work.
And a real piece of work.
Yes, and she got me to dress up as Crackers, the corporate crime-fighting chicken. And
you were one of the corporate crime-fighting chickens.
We got sprayed by a chemical company in New Jersey that was doing
Right.
testing on people for $50 a pop, and you had me dress up as Crackers.
How old were you then?
I was like, I was like 22.
22.
Yeah, something
wow.
like that.
So this is your revenge. You're gonna
No.
nail him tonight. Is that?
But as I was preparing today and just actually reading a lot about the backstory to Marshall's very powerful film that actually unfortunately coalesces with the ending of Michael's, I realized that it is the anniversary of Kristallnacht, stretching November 9th to 10th, when 90,000 Jewish businesses were attacked, people were beaten, and many would identify that really as the start of the overt application of fascism in Germany. It's also the anniversary, of course, of Donald Trump's election. It is the anniversary of the physical dismantling of the Berlin Wall. All of those as we gather here, and we're seeing the earth being destroyed. There are wildfires, another mass shooting, this time in again in California, where it feels like just days removed from this horrid massacre on Squirrel Hill in Pittsburgh, where Jews were killed because they're Jews, which was almost simultaneous to, yet again, black people killed because they're black. And we now have the firing of an attorney general that shouldn't have ever been an attorney general. And this response of so many people responding it, not because they're fans of Jeff Sessions, but because of what all of these things that keep happening and happening mean about the society that we're living in. And Michael, I wanted to start with you because we now know that the man who is believed to be responsible for sending these pipe bombs to prominent philanthropists like George Soros, to senior people within the Democratic Party, to former CIA and DNI officials. And I understand also that you personally were on this man's radar as well. And I know this isn't the first time that you've faced threats or potential lethal threats against you because of the work that you're doing, but maybe you could share with people also how you realized that you had footage of this man as well, who is now officially charged with sending these pipe bombs.
Well, last week I received a visit at my door from 2 FBI agents who wanted to inform me that they had discovered in this man's van in Florida what they called a, quote, abundance of research on me, both on his computer and in his van. And I think mostly they seemed confused, as they wanted to know where the package bomb was to me, because it had not arrived yet. And so, because it appeared from their investigation that I was high on his list. I couldn't help them because I'm fortunate enough to not have had that happen. But yes, this has been I've dealt with this for a couple of decades, really, of people either saying they were going to kill me or trying to kill me. I've been assaulted a number of times on the street and speaking on the stage. I've had people leap onto the stage with various weapons to hurt me. After I won the Oscar for Bowling for Columbine and gave that speech on the fourth night of the Iraq War, a man built a fertilizer bomb a la Oklahoma City to blow up my house in Michigan. And he was cleaning his AK-47, and it accidentally went off, and a neighbor heard it, and the police came and arrested him. And in his diary, it found his hit list, and I was at the top of that list. And after me, it was Janet Reno, Hillary Clinton, Rosie O'Donnell. And when the police told me this, my first thought was, how did I make the lesbian list? I was honored. Don't get me wrong. But I was right at the top, and then it was. So I always look for the silver lining in these dark clouds. But same thing happened too when the day they arrested him, and he's got a picture of me on the side of his van in Florida with a target over my face, and literally my first thought was, geez, he actually picked a really good picture of me, because I don't really photograph that well. So, and the target, the gun sight, was not right over my face. It was kind of more over my neck and shoulder, just as a, I thought I consider that a concession on his part. So, but no, I'm fine. I will be fine. And, the only terrorist threat to me really is, I just heard that McDonald's was bringing back the McRib. So that's all I have to worry about.
I understand you also found footage as you were, I don't think it happened while you were doing the film, but after this happened and his identity was known, then you found
No, the very first shoot that we did last year, Basil here, and one of the people that we've worked with for a long time, Eric Weinrib, I thought it'd be a good idea to go down to, this was Trump's first rally for his reelection in 2020, 4 weeks after his inauguration. And so the idea was to go down there and film not Trump, because we all know what he has to say, film the people who were there. And so they trained their cameras on the mostly white, angry male audience, and there was there he was, right in the front row, up to the right on the metal barricades. Cesar Sayak, the man with the package bombs in the van, and so so we had this very kind of early footage of him from right after Trump's inauguration. But that's kind of, this from working with us. We tend to show up at things. We were following Alexandria around in the Bronx and Queens months before the election when she was polling at -3%. It's just, we're always trying to just pay attention to what's going on. And one thing I learned this a long time ago, and actually I learned it watching early Letterman, the old Letterman show that was on NBC at 12:30 at night. Anybody remember?
Sure.
The really late show of Letterman. And in his early years, he used to go out and do things in the street or in the public, or he would just walk into the shoe department at Sears and start helping people try on shoes. Or when GE bought NBC, he took them a fruit basket as a gift, and they called the cops to have him arrested. What I noticed watching that early Letterman footage was how much he paid attention, not to what he was directly dealing with, but to what was happening in the peripheral vision. And that both the comedy and the political statement oftentimes was not happening directly in front of your nose or in front of his nose, but it was happening here and there. And if we had a wider scope to our vision, I mean that literally and symbolically, but I think we would see more of what's about to happen to us sooner. And if we paid attention to that, all of us, those of us who do what we do, those of you who do what you do, even if all you do is be a citizen, if that's that to try and pay attention to that which is not happening or not being fed to you directly by the mainstream media, or not being told to you by pundits who seem to be, I don't know what they seem to be, but whoever, our society has decided that the New York Times and Tom Friedman and these people are the people that we are supposed to listen to because they're so, and they're just so full of shit most of the time. And I think what we need to be listening to and paying attention to is the stuff that's over there. And that's why for so many years, the culture, the society, the film industry, whatever you pick, whatever, has ignored women, has ignored LGBTQ people, has ignored people of color, has ignored young people, the people who really make up America. America is right now, I think, 68, 69% women, people of color, or young adults between the ages of 18 and 35. That's the vast majority of when you say America, you need to think that's what it is. It's not me. It's not the white guy who's still running it. It's the people that are in the peripheral vision, the people who have been kept out. And that is both the crime and the solution. That the crime being that they're kept over and out there, and the solution, they are the solution, and a goodly number of them on Tuesday proved that they could do this. If there are people in here who went up knocking on doors for Antonio Delgado, upstate, that is a district, that is a rural district, New York 19, I believe, right? That is 80% white and rural, and they elected a black man to represent them.
Who was portrayed as a gangster rapper by his opponent?
Well, if it was just that might have been kind of cool. But it was, I mean, if you saw the billboards or you saw any of the literature, they really just made his face as dark as possible, put a Trayvon Martin hoodie apparatus, whatever photoshopping, it was amazing work of fascist-style propaganda. And they thought that would work. And I'm certain that there were people in the Democratic Party structure, the apparatus, the hacks that run the party, that's kept us down, kept us away from defeating the enemy all these years. I'm sure they did not want him to win the primary. I know for a fact. I know for you. Well, you heard Alexandria say 15 minutes after she dropped off her petitions there in the Bronx, the Democratic Party lawyers were in there trying to rip it apart and trying to make sure she didn't make it on the ballot. That's who the Democratic, capital D, capital P party is. Not Democrats, not people who vote for Democrats. I vote for Democrats. But I'm talking about this party structure that is going to try to tamp down the Alexandrias and the Rashidas as soon as they go into session on January 2nd. And it's our job to make sure that they are the ones leading the new Congress, not the old hacks who have compromised and sold us out for so long. I'm so happy about what happened on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, by the end of the day, I knew that our real problem is going to be them. We already know what the problem with Trump is, and he's already spinning out of control. They have got to fight this. And then when you still have Nancy Pelosi saying, well, no, don't talk impeachment. You know, we don't have the Senate. We wouldn't win it anyways. You know, that's crazy making. And she has made herself, to me at least, ineligible to be the House Speaker with her inability to really understand the moment we're in right now. And that moment has to be led by the Antonio Delgados, by the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes, and the Rashida Tlaibs.
You know, Michael, I think one of the very powerful aspects of your film is the historical analysis. I mean, you have two very serious scholars of fascism on that navigate the narrative at the end. And I'm sure some would view it as controversial to dub Trump over Hitler, but there are very striking, documentable similarities to the tactics that were used, and your film does a very effective job of showing that. And Marshall, I think it would be very helpful for people here if you tell the genesis story of how this event took place at Madison Square Garden, because it wasn't that the Nazi Party had some massive following in the United States at the time. And in fact, it's almost funny that this guy sounds like Hitler speaking in German, and he's saying we need to give America back to Americans. And he himself was an immigrant. What other forces drove people to the event that night? My understanding is Father Coughlin's radio show was central. And what was the upshot of what happened that night?
Well, I mean, one of the things that's so striking about it is what you point out, that his accent is German, and I think that partly explains why it didn't get bigger than it did. And there's sort of, you know, the classic line is that when fascism comes to America, it's not going to have a German accent, and it's not going to be swastikas. It's going to be wrapped in the American flag and sound like Americanism. And to me, what struck me so much when I saw the footage is the way that demagoguery uses the same tactics throughout history, from the Spartans to the Nazis to the Bund to what we see today. And you know, whether it's wrapping the symbols of your country in around an ideology that's contrary to the country, or whether it's picking a minority group, Muslims or Jews or Mexicans, and blaming them, you know, saying that we have to be the group, and anybody who's outside of our group, we have to take the country back from. I mean, that's the thing that was so striking to me about seeing it. And like you say, you had leaders that were making these arguments. You also had Father Coughlin, who had 3 million listeners to his radio show, and
sort of the Sean Hannity of that time.
I mean, it was Fox News in the 1930s, basically. It's when I first saw that footage, it was actually before Charlottesville, and it was before any. I thought it was going to be a metaphor for Trumpism. I didn't realize that it was that we were actually going to talk about actual Nazis. I thought we were going to use that as a metaphor to talk about demagoguery, just general demagoguery, and about the way that people are vulnerable to the power of demagogues.
And just briefly, explain who the man was that rushes the stage, and then we see him being dragged down first by the Nazis and then by the police, and his pants being ripped.
Yeah, his name was Isidore Greenbaum. He was a plumber's assistant from Brooklyn, and
It's always Isidore Greenbaum, isn't it?
Right.
Every time.
Yeah, it was like a 20-something-year-old guy who just came, didn't have a plan to rush the stage, wanted to see what was going on, was so shaken by what he saw that he just couldn't help himself, ran out on stage, and was arrested that night, had to pay for disturbing the peace, had to pay a fine for disturbing the peace. And it's so interesting to read the New York Times articles that covered that event and covered his argument with the judge the next day, who said that, Isidore, don't you realize that somebody could have gotten hurt by when you ran out on stage and disturbed the peace like that? And he said, don't you realize that somebody's going to get hurt from the words that are coming out of this guy's mouth? And of course, this thing happened. You mentioned that today is the anniversary of Kristallnacht. This was 3 months later. So Kristallnacht happened 3 months later. 20,000 Americans who, probably were nice to their neighbors, who had jobs, who, went home, put their kids to the babysitter, put on suits and hats, and went to Madison Square Garden to cheer and laugh and be entertained as a guy who's going to get beaten up for defending people who would be killed by the millions in the next few years.
Michael, I appreciated at the end of your film that you didn't just leave us with the impression that Trump is just a descendant of the sort of fascists, but is a product of a mythology that is embraced about what America is, and that you're saying, I'm fighting for an America that hasn't yet existed. Alan Nairn, the journalist with a lot of experience in war zones and facing down U.S. militarism and authoritarianism, described Trump's ascent to power as him, after thoroughly defeating 16 Republicans in the most powerful political family in the United States, dragging the right-wing oligarchs kicking and screaming back into power because none of them could have won it. But I wonder to what extent they're driving the ship. People like Mike Pence, who is he's not just a Christian supremacist who calls his wife mother. He is a very serious political operative. And people like Mitch McConnell know that they couldn't have won without Trump. To what extent is Trump driving the agenda right now in all of the authoritarianism that you showcased here? And to what extent is this just how the Republican Party is, and this is their best shot they've had in generations to ram all of it through because Trump is delivering? He's like a Trojan horse for them.
Trump was always treated very poorly by the uber rich of New York City. Wall Street didn't like him, the big banks didn't like him, and he always felt slighted by them. They treated him as if he was like the trailer trash of millionaires. And from Queens, they'll talk like he was from Queens, the whole thing. And they certainly were not that excited about him running. They immediately figured out how he could be a useful tool for them, for capitalism. And that's why not only has there not been a peep out of them since he gave them their tax cut and has done all the other things in terms of cutting EPA regulations and things that we don't even know about. They happen on a daily basis in each federal government department because you just could never keep up with it if you actually knew what was going on every day. That 2 weeks ago, he got rid of the department at the EPA that's responsible for the environmental health of children. Fired the woman, got rid of the people, that's it, gone. Hardly anything on it in the news. You have no idea how many millions of acres of land he gave away today to the oil and gas companies. This happens every single day, and he is doing the work now of Wall Street and the big banks in corporate America. And they are the main beneficiaries of what he's doing to dismantle from inside the federal government. And when and if, and I'm sorry I have to use the word if, because I fully believe he'd be reelected right now, even after Tuesday, because you can't name the person who could defeat him right now.
Is that Maggie Haberman I hear laughing at you?
Right, exactly. Yes, I'm the Keith Ellison of this panel here. But that's all they did was they never took Trump seriously, and it was all a big joke. And a few people were trying to point out this is not a joke. And what's so chilling about Marshall's film is, and you said it was only 7 minutes long, and it felt like 17 minutes long because it's so excruciating watching that and knowing that that happened here in this city, not in Bumstock, Mississippi, but it happened here. And then you remember, of course, that is this city that gave us Donald Trump. It is this city that gave us Rush Limbaugh, WABC, where he started here. It is this city that gives us Fox News. It is this city that gave us the Buckleys. You go through, you just can go down the list and you wonder, how the hell did this happen? That the most liberal city, the most politically active city in this country did not put a stop to this man. And I said this earlier today on the panel. I promise you, had he been from Flint or Detroit, you never would have heard of him. He never would have lasted the 40 years that he lasted here in New York City. And this is the sort of thing that just riles me about people who consider themselves liberals, but it just sounds like a nice thing to feel like you are. But the action and the fight that it takes to do what Isidore Birnbaum, do I have his name correct? Greenbaum did that night. If we are not all Isidore Greenbaums, we are doomed because Trump, the Yale professor that's in the film at the end, he said something to me, it's not in the film. He said, Snyder, Timothy Snyder, democracy does not have a self-correcting mechanism. It's not like the modern automobile that when your car goes into a skid now, the brakes, there's a self-correcting mechanism. It'll kind of steer you out of the skid. Democracy is a piece of paper. And it's always about how the people of that certain era decide to treat that piece of paper. And either amend it, make it better, ignore it. And if someone is taking us on a skid to the precipice, to the edge, of the cliff, it does not have a self-correcting mechanism other than we the people. The lack of coverage of the 1,000 demonstrations at 5 p.m. local time all across the 4 time zones yesterday. There had to have been, I was trying to do a count today, certainly it was in the hundreds of thousands. There were so many small towns, there's no way to cover it because we destroyed our media. Large corporations have bought it up and it doesn't exist. Number one thing people do after seeing my movie when they leave the theater, I've learned, they go on Google and they type in Flint bombing because there's no fucking way that happened because you would have known about it because you read 3 papers a day because you're well informed and you're educated and not a goddamn one of you knew about it. And why not? It's not your fault. Back in the day when I was growing up, Detroit, home of Father Coughlin, sorry, that's how it's said in the Midwest. Father Coughlin at the Shrine of the Little Flower in Royal Oak, Michigan, just outside of Detroit, where he broadcast those hateful radio shows from. The Detroit used to have a full-time NBC News Bureau, ABC News Bureau, CBS News Bureau, New York Times News Bureau, Wall Street Journal News Bureau. I think LA Times had a news bureau there for a while. Reuters, AP, the whole caboodle. And that was true in Chicago and Denver and Dallas and whatever. And as the big corporations have bought up and consolidated the media in the last 20 years, they have closed every friggin' bureau. They've got freelancers posted in maybe 2 or 3 spots around the country. The ABC News Bureau in London covers all of Europe and Africa, and the ABC News Bureau in Tokyo covers all of Asia and Australia. One guy or woman. When you don't have a large and full and active media, you don't know that a big American city was bombed by the Pentagon for 10 days and nights in a row. Back when I was a kid, you couldn't have done that without one of those reporters in the news bureaus in Detroit, 45 minutes away, would have heard about it. And then you would have heard about it. So much is going on that we don't know about. I mean, thank God for the Intercept, and thank God for the other things that people in here do, that of the things that you put out there. But here we are 24 hours after, again, one of the most spontaneous, largest demonstrations we've seen in recent years, and hardly any coverage of it, because coverage of it, first of all, would require a broad and full media, and it would result in something happening. And I've always felt, as I've gone through the years of making my films for these studios, for these network entities, that the only reason they allow me to keep making these movies, the only reason they give me the money to make these movies is because they make money off it for themselves. That's it. If people stop going, I would be not getting money. But more important than the money is they are confident that if 1 million people have seen this film already, which is, I'm guessing, roughly how many have seen it, they are so confident that they have dumbed down or numbed down the population that no one is getting up after seeing this movie and starting the revolution. They're so confident we won't do that because they've made our lives so fucking miserable because you're living from paycheck to paycheck. You've got to get that second job. You don't know if the kids are going to be able to get into college. They've got everybody so wound up. They can't pay for their parents' health bills. Everybody in here knows what I'm talking about because everybody's living it. And you've got to think of your family first. You got to take care of yourself first. And they've got everybody focused on that so that you can't get political. You can't do anything about it. And so they can let Michael Moore keep making his little movies because they know no one will do anything about it. And that's the game that's going on here, is that I believe the opposite. I believe they made a bad bet on me. They're convinced that I'm good for business because they make money and nobody here will do anything. I'm convinced that 1 or 100 or 1,000 or 100,000 or those kids that I went down to see in Parkland a week or two after the shooting, man, oh man, that's what's really going on. And that's what they need to be afraid of, but they don't even know. They don't even know what's coming down the pike. The people are going to rise up. They already have. They don't see it because it's in the periphery, because they're transgender, because they're women, because they're not what they're used to. They don't look like Tom Friedman. They don't look like Nick Kristoff, and to their detriment, they've made a bad bet on me because I keep doing this because I believe eventually the dam will break and somebody is going to lose their job when they find, they say, who the fuck gave him the money to make that movie? Don't ever give him any money again. And that's when you'll see the last of me, which will be good because that will mean hundreds of thousands, millions will have risen up and done the job, and I can go have a McRib and shut the fuck up.
It's well after midnight now. We have to clear out here in a moment, but very quickly, we can take two quick questions from the audience, and then Michael and Marshall can decide what they want to respond to or not. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. You have to be on microphone here. It's possible. As brief as possible.
Thank you very much. It was brilliant. One of the things that shocked me after the election of Donald Trump was not that Donald Trump existed, because he's obviously clearly bananas, was the fact that half the people who vote are that susceptible and emotionally vulnerable to not recognise a psychologically deficient person. This was my big shock, the biggest. What was the greatest surprise that you discovered making this film that you didn't know before?
Let's get one more in, and then we can we'll close it out. Yeah, go ahead. This gentleman here. Yeah, just pass him the mic, and then we'll.
Mike, I think it was since 1989 he made Roger and Me. In the last 30 years, obviously, you see what has Flint become. What do you think will change Flint for the better? What's that ingredient?
So I'll give both of you guys a last word here, but Michael, both of those were aimed at you, so you go ahead and start.
I'll start with the last one. Well, the thing that will help Flint and all the Flints of this country would be the end of capitalism and an economic system that's fair and just and democratic. When we have that, when everybody has a seat at the table, everybody gets a slice of the pie, everybody's gonna have it's gonna get better. I totally believe this. Specifically, what Flint needs right now is the tearing up of all the pipes, not just the main pipes, because they are starting to do some of that. They need to tear up all the pipes that go from the streets into the homes, and then the internal plumbing. It's all toxic. It's all wrecked. It all has to be redone. Every washing machine is ruined. Every dishwasher is ruined. They're all toxic. Everything has to. It's not an impossible project, but it can be done, and it has to be done. And I had hoped that President Obama would have done it. He had the chance to do it, and he didn't do it. There's somebody in the White House who actually knows something about a backhoe and building things. And if he's listening, he does listening to this, doesn't he, Jeremy?
Time, yeah.
He could do something about it because it's a fixable problem. But now, on Tuesday, Democrats essentially took over most of the state of Michigan, and 4 women now run the state: the governor, the secretary of state, the attorney general. So there's, I have some hope that good things will happen as a result of that. The first question of what was most surprising about making this film, nothing is surprising about Trump to me. I tried to warn people that he was going to win, and not many would listen to me on our side of the political fence, and laughed like Maggie Haberman did at Keith. So, one of the things I learned while we're making the film, and they haven't released this yet, but I'll just tell you, the Democratic Party in West Virginia did want to figure out what happened here with Hillary and Bernie and everything. And that's the state Trump won by the largest percentage, I think 68% of the vote. A few months ago, they commissioned a poll, the West Virginia House Democrats, asking the hypothetical question: if the 2020 election were held today and it was between Trump and Bernie Sanders, how would you vote? And it came out 48% for Bernie, 46% for Trump. Bernie wins by 2 points in a state where Trump beat Hillary by 40 plus points. It's an amazing, I can't wait till they release this, because it lets you know that there's something else going on. You just can't, like, say, write off West Virginia. Look what those teachers did. They went against the teacher union presidents and held their own strikes, and they got exactly what they wanted. And they wouldn't take when they were offered they wouldn't leave the bus drivers and the other school employees behind. The sense of solidarity was so powerful. So to see that, to be in West Virginia and to feel like, wow, I'd love to live here, was a great feeling, and it gave me a lot of hope that this could happen elsewhere if people just believed in themselves and the power that they have, and don't listen to the Democratic Party leaders, don't listen to the union leaders that are wrong. There's good union leaders, but if they're so bought into the system of we all got to get along here and we got to compromise and there's no time for compromise right now. We have to really move forward, and we have to move fast. 11/9, I wanted to add, is also the day that the fascist party in Italy was formed in the 1920s. It's the day that the SS was formed in Germany. I forget the year. Tia, you know some of these. What are some of the other ones that I mean, this is look up what happened on November 9th in history. It's an amazing list of interesting and serious things. But that's my answer to those two questions. And a huge belief I have in the power of all the individuals in here and throughout the country now to keep this movement going, to build it. You in here have to run for office. There's no excuse. Everybody's got to run for office at some point, even if it's for precinct delegate. You have to. It's your duty as an American now to run for office. I ran when I was 18. I was elected to the Board of Education in Michigan, and you have to run for city council, school board. If there's a dog catcher thing, our lowest office on the Michigan ballot is county drain commissioner. You're in charge of the sewage. That's a great job too if you want to run for that. But you've got to run. You've got to think about running and look what they pulled off. Look at the people who are so-called nobodies, no political experience. When I heard that they're a Native American woman, the first Native American woman I couldn't believe of all those words that it was the first. Are you kidding me? You would have thought that would have, after 500 years of genocide, you'd think, there's so much that happened on Tuesday. I haven't processed it all yet, but I want to encourage you sitting here to never think that you can't do that or shouldn't do it. You can do it. And I think Alexandria and Rashid and the others are going to be putting together materials to show you how they did it, and then you should do it. You have to do it. I'm very concerned about what Trump is going to be pulling off here in the next weeks and months, and we're all going to have to be very, very active. But Marshall should have something important to say to.
Yeah, no pressure on you coming after Michael there, Marshall.
I guess I would just say, in terms of the things that I learned from the Madison Square Garden thing, was just being struck by how vulnerable and fallible we are as creatures, and that demagogues who are funny and mean can stir up things in people that people can be pushed one way or they can be pushed another way. And there's a shot in there of a little kid who's watching Isidore Greenbaum get beaten up, and I sort of spotted it and zoomed in on that shot so you can see it's much grainier than the rest. But and he's just dancing with delight and excitement that there's a thrill to being part of a mob. And when you watch these Trump rallies, it's easy to be appalled by it, but I think it's also important to understand that there's something human that draws us towards that, and that we need to be aware of that as we construct the best ways to resist it. So,
Michael, I can't resist asking you one last two-part question. I know Trump doesn't like it when certain people ask him multiple questions. He calls them stupid, or their question was racist. I'm sure that I won't get that from you. I know that this has been brought up before, but any chance you would ever consider running for president?
Like I said, I already ran for office when I was 18.
Okay, yes, I know.
And I retired at 22.
It was legendary, I know.
So what?
Michael, Oprah, Michael.
Yeah, they won't win.
Yeah. Well, the real.
Yeah. No.
But the real question, and he's alluding to it also. I mean, who would beat Trump? Who do you think should run? Because as it is, it's going to be Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren maybe is talking about it, Joe Biden. I mean, the whole Chuck Todd talks about it all the time. But who would you like to see run? Who could beat him?
You mean the question implies other than me, right?
I'm including you in it and Oprah, but
I would, I'd love to do it only because I would love to just do the debate. That alone would be, it will. Yes.
All right, if you decide not to run.
I'm not here for your entertainment pleasure.
Okay, got it.
Just to run against Trump.
Got it.
We have to run a beloved American. We have to win. So ask yourself as you process who this person is this person a beloved American? Who is a beloved American that has our politics? Beto O'Rourke. Yes, I agree with that. Go further. Somebody who's not a politician. American people wanted a bartender from the Bronx, not a politician. They wanted a Palestinian American from Detroit, a single mom. Think of who is not a politician and a beloved American. Obviously, Oprah. I wrote a chapter in my book 15 years ago called Oprah for President. I've been pushing this for a long time because who wouldn't vote for Oprah? Everyone loves Oprah. And my deal with her would be we would give her her show back at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, except it would come from the Oval Office. I think that'd be a very powerful show. Tom Hanks. I've twice asked Tom Hanks to run. Who the fuck doesn't like Tom Hanks? Come on. No. He's got great politics. He's a smart guy. Michelle Obama would win. Michelle Obama would win. And she's to the left of her husband. And she is beloved. I'm sure she doesn't want to get within 10 feet of the White House. Nonetheless, I just heard coming in here, she's got a book coming out on Tuesday, and she says she will never forgive Trump for putting her family in danger by calling them not Americans, not citizens, Kenyans, whatever. And man, she's got the fire in her. She should be the template. If she doesn't run, it should be who's our Michelle Obama that could win. Sully Sullenberg wrote a op-ed in the Washington Post last week that you should read about how he's been a Republican and he's had it. And he's an American hero. He's a beloved American. Who's our Sully? Who's our Sully? Who's a Sully who's a Democrat? Or someone on the left, a liberal? Why can't we start thinking like this? See, I'm watching people's faces. You can't see this on your podcast, but it's the look of, no, wait a minute, why do we have to do a celebrity thing? We're the smarter party. We're the smarter people. Why does it have to be that? Because it's America. If you don't want to live here, you can go to other countries where you don't have to have a reality show to get into the White House. I can name those countries for you. But if you're gonna friggin' stay here, we've got to win. If we get the right person in there, they can help bring us back to a more intellectual place. But first we got to get in there, and we've got to win. I can't stand liberals who feel smug and superior because they've acted in a noble way. I did the right thing. I didn't vote for that. Just stop it. Our country, we're going to lose our democracy. And so my encouragement is to find that person. I can't name that person tonight as to who that is. And I love Elizabeth Warren, and I love Kamala Harris, and Corey seems like a good guy and all that. But I hear people say we can't run a woman. Why not? In fact, I think we have to run a woman. If possible, it should be a woman. Why? Because of Hillary? She won. We still don't know that we won. We still don't know that our side came out 3 million votes ahead, 10 million votes ahead in the Senate races on Tuesday. The people are with us. I gave you all the statistics from acceptable polling companies in Harvard University in this film that showed you that the American public sides with us on nearly every single issue. We'd have a much harder time if we were Martin Luther King in the 50s or Gloria Steinem or Betty Friedan in the 60s. They had to actually convince people to stop thinking the way you've thought for hundreds of years. We don't have to do that. We don't have to convince people to be pro-choice, or that climate change is real, or that the minimum wage is too low, or that women should be paid the same as men. We don't have to do any convincing. That's the hard part. It's handed to us The silver platter is called the American public. Why don't we use that? Why don't we start acting like the winners and the majority that we are? And let's run somebody who's going to win. That I'm sorry I don't have a better answer by coming up with a magic person right now, and maybe it's too soon. But you know, I will go out and I will work for that person, and I'll do everything I can. What was the second part of your question?
No, I think the workers need to go home now. So with that,
Yeah,
well, thank you
yes,
all for
let
being
them go.
here. Yes, workers, please go. Thank you to Marshall Curry and to Michael Moore.
Thank
you
you.
to NYC Docs,
Thanks,
Laura
Jeremy.
Poitras, Field Division. and
Thank
the
you,
Anderson.
Jeremy. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everybody.